Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime, here with my next Airspeed's Korra Rewatch video. This one is going to be for K406 Battle of Zaofu. And yeah, this is another, I think, good, absolutely fine episode of Korra. I feel fairly similarly about this one to the last one in that they very much follow each other up. They suffer a little bit from a lot of the underdeveloped stuff that's going on in the series right now. Kuvira's motivations, the setup for her. The lack of caring overly about the relationship between Sue and her because of how weird it's presented. Korra's recovery, like, she's made a big step forward and then this comes up and there's another step and it not being clear what's necessarily going on. I suppose that's part of the mystery, but I think the way it is ultimately resolved is kind of... it makes it a little bit more confusing than I think it needs to be. What's good about this episode is that the Bolin Varrick side of the episode with Batar Jr. is really good, as you really see how much those two are now opposing Kuvira and what they're trying to do here, getting out of having to work for the Earth Empire. That's well done. We see towards the end of this episode the setup for, I suppose, the need for Opal to sort of save her family, and a clear setup for why Bolin would reunite with Opal to, save the family for Operation Beifong, of course, later on. So they definitely do some important stuff in this episode, but it definitely, to me, doesn't really feel like one of the best episodes of the book. It, in a way, is the mid-season finale here. We're just about at the midpoint, of course. Obviously, next episode is the exact middle of the book, but they more treat a reunion as the sort of start of the second half of the season. So this is, in essence, our season finale with the first meeting of, I suppose, in combat between Korra and Kuvira, which I think is a good place to start. We'll address the lead up to it in a little bit, but the fight itself is probably one of the more notable things about the episode. I feel very similarly about this fight specifically to how I felt about Zahir versus Korra at the end of Book 3, where the fight is ultimately just Korra in the Avatar state in Book 3, here without the Avatar state, going full force at Kuvira and basically just getting countered and hurt each time. And it just repeats itself over and over again. I don't think there's a lot of particularly amazing choreography. Apart from, I suppose, they do sort of animate Kuvira's counters to be sort of different each time, but Korra's moves specifically aren't particularly strong from someone who's meant to be a master of all four elements. And that's part of why, I suppose, it's meant to represent that. So you don't really take a lot out of the fight on Korra's side of things, because the plot point, the story behind this fight is meant to present that Korra's not fully back, even though everyone else thinks she should be. I don't think it particularly shows that Kuvira is like one of the best fighters in the series. I think for sure she's one of the best, earth and metal benders that we've seen. Probably one of, if not the best metal benders. I suppose it'd be really a debate between her and Toph, in that they seem to more or less establish that Kuvira is a level above Lin and Sue individually. But Toph would be obviously the one who'd probably be better than her. So she's definitely a good opponent, but like Zahir, I feel is the type of opponent where in a fair fight with Korra at her best, without even using the Avatar state, you would expect Korra to be able to defeat Kuvira. And that's why, like Zahir, they kind of have to frame the fights between the two characters in a way that sort of diminishes what Korra is able to accomplish. So here, very clearly, she's not fully healed yet or recovered. At the very least, she's rusty, and that gives Kuvira the advantage here. In their final fight, they're obviously leading up to a specific story situation, so the fight doesn't get the best resolution, and it's obviously interrupted, but they still put everything in Kuvira's favor by having the fight take place in a metal... with the two of them in a cramped area, completely surrounded by metal, and Kuvira having the lay of the land, knowing the lay of that area so much better than Korra. So there's a disadvantage there that Korra can't do her power moves, and Kuvira is in her natural environment, basically. So that's my thoughts on the Korra-Kuvira dynamic in terms of them fighting. I don't really feel like we ever properly got into just a fair fight in the way that I wish we could have. I liked their fight from the finale, but I don't feel they quite went far enough with it. As for the build-up to this, I think it's quite good because you have Sue, Wei, and Wing get captured immediately, establishing that Kuvira was a step ahead of them. She knew Sue would come after her. And in general, Kuvira in this episode, I think, plays this whole episode, each scenario she's presented with in this episode, perfectly. She plays the Sue aggression towards her perfectly, plays the opposition from Korra and everyone else against her perfectly by having her army there to strike if their peace agreement is ever broken, but purposefully acting innocent about the fact that, oh, I have my army here. Why is it even here if you're trying to negotiate? That's the obvious point that Kuvira can't really defend. If she came here to negotiate, there was no real need to bring her army. And she plays it in a way where she kind of forces her opposition to fight her first. So she doesn't come across as the aggressor, even though her bringing her army there is the aggressive move. What do you expect someone to do other than be very cautious and willing to fight if they approach you like that? And again, Korra is in this kind of attitude of wanting to talk to Kuvira, not wanting to jump to fighting immediately, and you can see that Opal is shocked by this, but you see that Jinora kind of very much agrees with this, in that Korra and Jinora can both see that the situation, like, you have to be aware, like, Kuvira is playing you here. There's been this kind of agreement to not fight each other. If we go after her, we're giving the army license to come in. And I know you think I'm powerful in the Avatar state, but a whole army is still going to be a huge challenge. And so that it's meant to represent, that Opal's kind of emotion of, like, this is her family involved in this. So you understand where she's coming from, but she also, I think, ultimately accepts that she has to go along with what Jinora and Korra's plan is, and that is to have the negotiation afterwards once they find out that Sue, Wei, and Wing have been captured. And again, it's another situation where, like, Kuvira just stonewalls Korra, trying to be reasonable about this, in that they just are on opposite sides of things. The only way that's going to lead to is a fight. And Kuvira clearly goads Korra into the fight, knowing that she can play this well. I suppose the calculation here is that I don't think Kuvira exactly knows what way the fight was going to go. I don't think she would have been 100% able to predict that Korra would be this off. She doesn't know the specifics of what Korra's been through, outside of she's been recovering for a long time. But to Kuvira, she must think that, oh, I'm just better than the Avatar, and there doesn't immediately seem to be any issue there. So I kind of wonder what Kuvira's approach would have been if Korra was 100% and really, like, pushing her and maybe had the advantage. I do think that she ultimately would have asked her army to come in if Korra went for, like, the finishing blow, and it would have forced Kuvira into, I suppose, breaking the agreement herself. But the way it happens, of course, she plays it perfectly once again by basically challenging Korra to a one-on-one fight, because she adds to the morale of her army by basically saying that, look, I'm going to fight her one-on-one. I don't want to put any of you at risk. I'm going to risk myself because I'm your leader, and show you that I care about this and you guys more than anything. And so it forces Korra to be like, you also have to go in one-on-one, otherwise you're the one being dishonorable in this fight. And obviously the whole idea of no interferences and so on. And then especially Kuvira at the start of their fight announcing that basically, oh yeah, by all means use anything you want, all four elements, the Avatar state. She's kind of noting that, like, yeah, like, you can kind of cheat if you want to, use the Avatar state from the get-go, which is the obvious way to solve this situation. But Kuvira saying it, and Korra also being kind of cautious with it, is the correct, I suppose, move. It's just Kuvira makes it so that it's even more of a, like, no, you should want to prove yourself without using that. And that's another situation here. This is the fight of Korra trying to prove that she's back fully. But it's clear that she's not, and she has to use the Avatar state to basically save herself from being killed. And that's what we get here. Like, she uses the Avatar state. It's like she goes full into it, in that it is sort of defense mechanism, but she has some control over it. And the big shift in the fight, obviously, is that she's going to finish Kuvira off, just completely overpowers her here. But then when Kuvira looks up after her hair's kind of been like, goes down, it's Korra's face, and she kind of is having these visions again that she was having from before, that we felt like she got past, but now it's back again. So what's the problem? And this is obviously like where, like, the interpretation comes back into thing, which is both kind of good and a little bit confusing because we've already got past this, but it's back again. And I suppose part of it is meant to be the comparison between Korra and Kuvira, that she sees herself in Kuvira. We've already seen that before, but now you can see that when Kuvira's hair is down, they sort of look alike a bit as well. And I suppose in a way, from Korra's perspective, this is like the reverse of what Zahir did to her. Is her in the Avatar state going to kill Kuvira, not almost a carbon copy of Zahir attacking her? That's one interpretation of it. The other one is just that here she is fighting a villain who is hurting her again, and those memories come back because immediately someone knew that once it hurt her again, it's come back up. So definitely interesting stuff, and it leaves Korra in an odd position of, like, she has to be saved by Opal and Jinora, and once again she's on the recovery path again, and what's going to happen? So it makes sense why she needs to go back and be around all of her friends, Tenzin again, everyone, to support her and get her through this last stage of her recovery. And it just sets up that the meeting of Korra and Kuvira when Korra is fully back, that's going to be a really notable moment. Jinora and Opal are really powerful here, just maintaining that tornado for so long to keep the whole army back. Really cool move there between the two of them. It's just, I don't think it's particularly, a good criticism to say that, like, maybe this is where they should have had Jinora stand up a little bit more. It's fine. It's a demonstration of, like, Jinora's powers outside of just the kind of spirit projection technique, which she does use, which I do like. That you see Huan doing an art lesson with Milo and Iki, and again, because he's like this kind of more emotional artist rather than a technical artist. He loves Iki's kind of more childlike, colorful piece because it demonstrates her personality more, whereas Milo's is just pure technique, and it's amazing looking, but it's, from Huan's perspective, it's just a carbon copy of yourself. It doesn't tell me anything about you. So that was a fun little moment as they call in for help. Moving over to the Baatar, Varrick and Bolin side of things, obviously they begin to present a little bit of Baatar here, that in a way he should be the one going ahead with this mission. Like, if he was as good as he thinks he is, he should be there and thereabouts on the Spirit Vine project as well, but he's not. Varrick is a genius compared to him, and the idea is also that his father is kind of a genius compared to him as well. So what's going to be Baatar's big kind of moment to really step out of the shadow and prove himself? It's not really here, because he has to learn everything about the Spirit Vines from Varrick, and later on has to use Julie as his assistant, and the knowledge that she has from Varrick on this project as well. And I like that Varrick kind of caught on to that Baatar is sort of weak-willed in a way when it comes to this sort of thing. You can really get to Baatar by targeting the fact that he thinks he's an amazing scientist because he's involved in the Earth Empire, but he's not really. Like, what have you invented? Why am I here if you're the inventor, and that sort of thing, and him really goading Baatar in that way. Bolin being able to see it as well. It's that obvious and on the forefront of his character that this is a problem Baatar faces. And I like that throughout the whole thing. Like, you see Varrick sort of be a bit more normal, in a way a bit more composed here, but Bolin kind of being the one who still isn't on board with what Varrick is doing. Like, it's clear that Varrick is sort of suggesting, like, I've got this. I'm in control of this situation. You just back me up when the time comes. But Bolin is just so not on track with what Varrick is saying. So when the bomb reveal comes out that he wasn't actually trying to make anything happen, he was just turning the Spirit Vine into a bomb. It's a really clever move from Varrick, but then you immediately find out that, okay, yeah, it was an attempt to escape, but almost more than that, there's this kind of dark side of it where he didn't really have an escape plan. He wanted to just kind of blow himself up, and that be how he destroys the entire research on all of this and gets, Batar out of the picture. That he's so upset about the betrayal of Zhu Li that he's almost willing to commit suicide over it. They layer it in like humor and Varrick's craziness, but there's definitely an element of it that is kind of what we're dealing with here. So that was it was interesting to see, just to show how much like Varrick in a way needs Zhu Li and how big of an impact the betrayal actually was, kind of showing him that now that she's gone, he realizes just how much kind of she meant to him. So that's going to be part of some important development. But I love the little exchange over the timer. Like the timer goes off, you can hear it ticking. Then he takes it, the remote detonator, and Batar's just like, why'd you have both? And he just kind of explains like, oh, I made this one first, but then I realized that this could happen, so I made that one, and I never bothered to take that one out. I've got my bases covered. Just a fun little thing about a pretty common kind of trope that kind of tends to come up with bombs. Like, it either tends to be one or the other, but Varrick has both, of course. Yeah, like, it's just their escape here. They kind of separate the cars, and Bolin has to be the one to get Varrick out of this mess because he didn't have an escape plan. A little bit of a kind of error here in terms of what's the best way to call it? The kind of logic error in a way of like Bolin has to use his earthbending powers to get them off the train by basically earthbending through the ground. But then when they show you the tracks that he clearly has to go through because they just go through a hatch that's on the floor of one of the train carts, it doesn't make a ton of sense because the tracks are fully metal. Like, there's no gaps in tracks where Bolin could go through. So like, either Bolin did some crazy earthbending where he like took the metal down with it, where like the power of his earthbending just kind of ripped the metal apart, or they just kind of completely lost track and they kind of designed the action of the scene before they kind of designed the background of the scene, and they didn't account for the fact that Bolin would need to metal bend through the middle of the tracks. And it's probably just a bit of a design thing where they just thought that, okay, we'll have the tracks be just the two rails, of course, but then the kind of gap bit in the middle also be metal, when it probably should have just been clear with earth. Little error, but it's something I think a lot of people notice with this episode, and especially when you've noted so clearly Bolin is not a metal bender, and he clearly doesn't use lava bending, but it is what gets them out of this. And so it just establishes that Bolin and Varrick are sort of on the run here. They're going to be on their way back to the rest of the group, and so now all of a sudden you have Korra, the Air Kids and so on. They're on their way kind of back to everyone, as are Bolin and Varrick. But Bolin and Varrick have the information that, okay, they've lost Zaofu now, but even worse than that is the fact that Kuvira is preparing this giant weapon, that she has spirit weapon cannons, and then the end of this episode sets up that there's an even bigger thing coming with the fact that, okay, she's preparing a weapon, but she also wants the domes of Zaofu ripped down as well, and it ends up being like that's going to be the raw material that's used to make the Colossus. So, pretty good setup on that front, as everyone begins to come back together. And the last scene of the episode is pretty much just the surrender of Zaofu, what has to happen, and Batar Sr. as the, I suppose, one free one who's not already captured, refusing to kind of bow down to Kuvira, and refusing to be the one to just kind of like, I suppose, give up the city like that. It's probably his best moment in the series, Batar Sr., in terms of just like standing up. And the moment with Batar Jr., where Batar Jr. is so frustrated that his father will not like give Kuvira this kind of credit, and comes up and demands he kind of bow down. And Batar's response to his son is brilliant here, just by saying, I'm so disappointed in you. And he doesn't call him Batar, he calls him just Junior. And given what very clearly Batar is going through, where he's living in his father's shadow, his father still calling him Junior and not by his like actual name is a demonstration of that in his mind, like, what you've done here you think is impressing me, but it's not. This is not the way we raised you to go about things in this way. And it's why this plot point's always felt a little like it's there, it's actually really interesting, but it's all done through like 2 or 3 very minor scenes. And I hope the comics, when they get around to dealing with the aftermath of Book 4, with the whole Earth Empire, Kuvira, Batar stuff, they address this a little bit more, because I'd like to see more of Batar, Batar and Batar Jr. talking, Sue, and the attempt to, I suppose, bring him back into the family, redeem him, and especially if they decide to do anything similar with Kuvira. But yeah, the end of the episode is just Julie joining Batar Jr. as, like, she's now going to be Batar's assistant on the Spirit Vine project. And the idea is that, like, oh, this is complete betrayal. She's now going to help on the thing that Varrick never wanted to do. But is there something more there? Because again, you remember back to the fact that Julie isn't just his like assistant. There was also the little bit of like romance setup. So is this undercover Julie, and what is she going to do? As we'll see in the upcoming episodes. So, pretty cool stuff. In that, like, the one of the main takeaways from this is obviously the loss of Zaofu. It kind of is like, oh, well, that means Kuvira's completed her mission. It also sets up that she has most of the Beifong family captured. Opal, Toph, and Lane are the only ones kind of like not involved in this. So it sets up that a couple of these are going to have to go back and save them at some point because they're important characters. As for Kuvira, it sets up like, okay, she's basically accomplished her goal now. What's she going to do? There's the weapon, but since she's accomplished everything, what's the weapon for? And the obvious implication would be, like, at some point you maybe expect, like, will the Fire Nation come in? Will their army try and tackle the Earth Empire? Will the United Forces go after Kuvira? Is the weapon to take down them? Or what? And they obviously lean then into the fact that Kuvira wants to go a step further. She wants to take back all of the Earth Kingdom, including the stuff that used to be the Earth Kingdom that is now United Republic. And that being, I suppose, the thing that truly turns everyone against her, where like they have to oppose her because of what she's doing. The United Republic represents peace in the world, and she is trying to basically take away this thing that represents balance between the 4 nations from everyone and just take it back for the Earth Kingdom. And there's no real justified way to do that. So, you know, solid episode, I think, in that it definitely has its moments. It plays its role well to get us to where we need to go to. But, you know, there's definitely a few things lacking just because I think previous episodes haven't developed stuff as well as it needs to. But, yeah, next up is going to be Reunion, and we'll get into this episode and the disappointment with it and how it's such a hyped episode because it is the reunion and how it really fails to deliver. But we'll get to that one next. But yeah, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.